You ever have that one game you remember having as a kid, but when you go back to replay it years later, you discover you never made it past level 1? For me, that was the original Epic Mickey. So yeah, funny story, this game scared me shitless when we picked it up back in 2010. I was only about 7 at the time, and when I tell you I was a scaredy cat and that Dark Gaia also fucked me up for over a year until me and my siblings sat down to commit to beating it, I do mean it. Epic Mickey on the other hand, I've never beat. I recently got to Ventureland in the original Wii version, but that was as far as I ever got. My history too can be saved for another day, but needless to say, when the remake was announced, a from the ground up remake at that, I was fucking hyped. A childhood classic coming back, one that might be able to fix many of the game's issues that were in the original? Yes, please! Time passed, the game came out, and I beat it in under 2 days. So whenever this video came out, I'm sorry for the delay on that. But I'm gonna open by saying, this is a replacement for the original. Almost every single issue I had in the original is gone. Not every single one, we'll get into it for later. For now, what is Epic Mickey? I think most of the stuff can be explained with a plot summary. Plot begins before Mickey became a global icon. He finds himself going through a magical mirror and watching as some wizard makes some kind of map, seeing the magical paint and thinner. Awesome Michael himself decides to make a statue in his image. Needless to say, he fucks up. He creates the Storm Blot. Trying to thin it out, he ends up dropping the bottle into the map. This turns out to be some sort of portal to a place for forgotten cartoons. Many years pass, about 90 or so, some shit like that, and he's dragged back into Wasteland. A wasteland he helped create. Now powered with a magic brush, he has to decide if he's going to save this world, or save it but be an asshole while doing it. Yeah, so the morality system has never been the strongest element of the franchise. Or you can help people out and fix up this terrifying take on Disneyland. You can also just ditch them and go through the main story. You still save Wasteland and become brothers with Ozzy. You just make it so that everybody else's lives suck. Yippee, I guess. Yeah, the morality system just sucks. This is also for how you go with dealing with bosses, as depending on how you beat it, if you do it with paint, you get more paint. If you do it with thinner, you get more thinner. But before I get into that, I should probably get into the gameplay. You control Awesome Michael Rat using the power of platforming and the brush to make your way through a bunch of linear obstacle courses. You can either paint the world or thin it, create or destroy. And this is used to good effect while platforming, but is not the best for combat. Let's start with the platforming, shall we? In the original, platforming was, to put lightly, a fucking disaster. Mickey felt too heavy at times, and would have issues as such. You know, he also often did the Mario 64 180 spin, and just took a full second or so before coming to an actual stop, which did not work well for the often kinda tight platforming that was happening. In the remake, Mickey controls like a fucking dream. Genuinely, most of the reason I blasted through this game was just because he was so fun and genuinely snappy to control. I always feel like I'm in control. And he also added a few new moves. You know, you had his jump, his spin, his paint and thinner originally, but now you've got the dash, the sprint, and the ground pound. The sprint is so fucking good, especially for doing a lot of the fetch quests. The ground pound is a great way to clear up space when you're surrounded and dealing with enemies. And a dash, which helps to dodge and weave. It also helps with platforming as you can double jump out of a dash, even if you dash off a ledge, though it doesn't go as far as if you dash off a ledge. And as for the combat has never been Epic Mickey's strong suit. There are two major types of enemies in this game, Blotlings and the Beetleworks. The Blotlings can either be defeated by either thinning them out or painting them in. This is where another rebrushed change comes in. All painted in Blotlings now attack with paint rather than thinner, which helps a lot in combat. And then we have the Beetleworks. There's no redeeming them. You must murder them in cold blood by thinning them out and then spinning on the conveniently placed weak spot. Now, in the original, combat was made hard due to a few issues I'll get into in a sec, but in Rebrushed, they added in the lock-on mechanic introduced in Epic Mickey 2. And it's a godsend, as it does actually make the combat genuinely easier. Especially considering the cursor isn't flailing around in combat and constantly shifting the camera. Yeah, this is what I was on about before. The camera in the original is most of the reason why I never finished it, along with the controls being all over the place and the pacing issues we'll get into later. Now, 3D platformers and good cameras have never really gotten along well, but the original was genuinely terrible in most areas that weren't wide open spaces, which, mind you, was more of the game than you'd think. In Rebrushed, I never really had camera issues, and mind you, I am playing the Switch version, which does have some gyro, but only when using the brush for some reason. As for the pacing issues, I'm gonna be real, I really did not come across them in Rebrushed. But that's because this game is trying to be a collectathon. The problem is linear. You need to collect things called power sparks, and this is where most of the morality system comes in. You can collect them from either buying them, finding them around the world and around corners and such, or by completing missions. Now, because Mike feels so good to move, I went out of my way to complete some missions pretty early on, and do all the animatronic side quests. But if you're looking to just play the story and nothing else, you might be able to do so, But in the original, that's not happening at all. This does mean that sometimes you probably won't be able to move on. But to make up for this, they made e-tickets, the game's main currency, way more common and easy to pick up. So they added in areas of the ground where there are e-tickets now. And by the end of the game, I think I had like 2,000 or something e-tickets. Mostly because there really wasn't anything good to spend it on in the shop. Because there's a point where some missions become completely uncompletable. And by the time I had this many e-tickets, there wasn't really a point in going back. So do be aware of that. The other big collectibles in this game are the concept art and the gremlins. You free a gremlin, your life gets a little easier, or you can be a bitch and fuck up a sequence of events and spend like 5 minutes trying to unlock one. Either or, definitely not personal experience. God damn it, I messed this up so bad. Finally, the graphics. The original on Wii looked pretty good for being a Wii exclusive, but this remake knocks it out of the park. Even despite being the Switch port, I find myself genuinely loving how this remake looks. While it did have some frame rate related issues, only once did it actually affect things significantly and I couldn't replicate it later on. But be aware, while infrequent, frame rate drops do still happen on Switch. With all that being said, I'd absolutely say this is a replacement for the original on Wii, no doubt. Not just as a remaster, but as an introduction to the whole franchise. Start with rebrushed. At some point I will cover Epic Mickey 2, and maybe at some point I'll cover Power of Illusion down the line. But I'd just like to thank you so much for watching this, and until next time, do take care. Bye!